So in this video I'm going to talk about information gap activities. Now, information gap activities are a type of communicative activity which are great for the language classroom. They can be designed in many different ways for practicing different types of language. The reason I wanted to make this video is because most other kind of communicative activities are pretty well known and pretty easy to understand. Okay, so things like debate, survey, role play, most of us can kind of easily understand what those kind of activities might entail. But information gap activities are quite specific to language teaching. So I wanted to make a video with some examples to show you. Okay, so for information gap activities, they are often or usually two students who have different information and must communicate using the target language to complete the task. Now, I put two students here because I think that's the usual way of doing information gap activities, but you can organize them in different ways with groups or with teams, or with the classroom versus the teacher. But usually I think that information gap activities are two students and usually facing each other. And the task should be designed in such a way that the students have to communicate using the language focus of the lesson in order to share the information they have and complete the task. So I've put a few examples here just to give you a brief kind of overview idea of what this is. So the first example, you can see some colourful shapes and student A and student B. Often the materials are designed with student A and student B. Okay, so the student A has two shapes, student B has two different shapes, and the students have the different pieces of paper, and they can't show the paper, they have to explain and use the language. So here the language would be related to colours and shapes. So you can see student 1 has a shape and student B has the shape missing. Number 2, student B has the shape, student A has the shape missing. Okay, so that's a very simple visual representation of how information gap activities work. I've got one more example. If you look at the bottom, there's two pictures next to each other with a grandmother and a young child making a cake. This is a spot the difference activity. What this means is that these two pictures have some small differences and students have to find or spot those differences. So one student has one picture, one student has the other picture, and they describe the pictures, they describe what they can see in the pictures. When they find something that's different, they can circle and they found one of the differences. If you look carefully at the bananas in the bottom of the picture on the left has 2 bananas, the picture on the right has 3 bananas. So this would be something that students are trying to find to complete the task of the differences. Okay, let's have a look at some more specific examples then. And these examples are quite common because they are for practicing quite common expressions in language teaching. So the first one is drawing and describing rooms. So the student on the left here has a room with many items such as a car, a teddy bear, a sofa, a bed. Okay, so that would be part of your target language. But the student also needs to explain where are the items in the room. So the bed is on the left, the sofa is on the right, for example. The other student has a blank room. Okay, so they have a blank piece of paper, just a blank room. And they have to listen to the student explaining the room, and they have to put the objects or draw the objects in the right places. So the student on the left says, the sofa is on the right, the toy is on the floor, for example. This is quite a common way of practicing prepositions of place and language related to rooms such as bedroom or bathroom or living room. Okay, in this example, one student has the information, the other student doesn't have the information, but you can also do this type of activity where some of the room is there but each student has a different object. Okay, so one student has the car, the other student has the teddy bear, for example. Okay, moving on. Here's another common type of information gap activity, and in this activity there are some people. In this example it's cartoon characters, but it could easily be photographs as well. The student on the left, they have the same characters, but the student on the left has the names of the characters. So the student on the left says something like, Sally is wearing a blue cap. And the student on the right has to identify which character is Sally and write the character's name in the right place. Okay, notice the target language for this one is colour and clothing, and the sentence is wearing. Okay, so that gives you an idea about the type of language that you might need to introduce and scaffold before starting this activity. Okay, and here's another common information gap activity, using maps and sharing and comparing and finding information on maps. Very common because asking and giving directions and using maps is quite useful in a second language like English. There's different ways of doing this activity. You could have a very simple map, or you could have quite a detailed map, depending on how much language the students are able to use and how much detail they're able to explain places and directions and so on. Okay, but you can see a few examples here. The first example from Teach This website has some places, buildings in a town with a very simple kind of street grid for the students. And again, you've got student A and student B. So they would have different buildings on the map, and they have to communicate about where are the buildings, next to, in front of, and so on to complete the map. The other example here is a bit more detailed. It has more realistic kind of layout. So that would be for higher level students. And if you were teaching lower level students, you could even simplify it further. Okay, and here's an example which is a very simple kind of grid layout. This is quite an effective way of organizing information gap, because you can easily change the names or the content, but keep the same overall design. If you change the names and the content, then you're changing the target language expressions. So also this activity, this kind of design, I would suggest this is more of a kind of scaffolding activity. This wouldn't be the outcome or the final objective task of the lesson. This would be more of a scaffolding step for the lesson. Okay, this activity is more focused on just repetition of the structures and just using the structures. It's not really a real world task. Again, you can see that the information is different. Student A has part of the information, student B has part of the information. And here you can see also the target expression. Will Jenny go to university? Yes, she will. Okay, so you can see student B is asking the question, and student A has the information about Jenny. Jenny will go to university. If we move to the next one, get married. Now student A has to ask, will Jenny get married? Because student A has the blank, and student B has the check mark. So student B can answer, yes, she will. Okay. So this is a very much kind of repetitive practice of the grammar structures, and this would be good for scaffolding. Okay, so I hope that was useful and it gave you some ideas about information gap activities. They're very flexible. You can design them in different ways with different types of materials, and they can be used for practicing different types of target language. So think about using information gap activities for communicative classroom. Okay, thank you.